Hey guys, what's up? My name is Philip Benz with Benz Productions. I'm a wedding and commercial filmmaker based out of Greenville, North Carolina, and today we're going to be doing a breakdown of one of my wedding trailers. So what exactly are we going to be doing with this breakdown? We're going to be going over shot by shot all of the thought processes behind each shot, what equipment I used, maybe what direction I gave, what hurdles that we faced on the wedding day. Just to kind of give you guys an idea of what I do. So I full-time shoot weddings and commercial projects. Today we're going to be breaking down a wedding project. This is just going to be a 1-minute trailer. So this is going to be a longer form video, so I want you guys to really just dive into it. Feel free to pause it if you need to, come back to it. The whole idea of this video is to give you guys information. I don't like to hold anything back, keep secrets, stuff like that. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get on into it. The way that I'm going to start these videos is we're going to watch the whole video first. After we watch the video, we're going to go back shot by shot, okay? So that's the whole idea behind this. So let's go and do it. All right, so that was Justin and Madelyn's wedding trailer. So let's go ahead and roll this thing all the way back and let's dive into each one of these shots. So I always like to open up with the drone shot. The drone that I use is a Mavic Pro. It's not the Mavic Pro 2 or whatever, it's the original Mavic Pro. Still works damn good. Shoots 4K. I'm able to get, the shots I'm able to get from that. So in terms of specs, what I do, this is the only camera on the wedding day that I go semi-auto with. So it's auto white balance, autofocus. What I do though is I have this set at 4K, 24 frames per second. And throughout the majority of the day, I actually film on my GH5, my Panasonic GH5, 4K 60 frames per second. But I edit in a 24 frames per second timeline, so it kind of helps me out with that. But we're not going to go into specifics about the editing process. We're going to really go into what I did to get the shot. This shot was actually towards the end of the day, so I always like to do the drone shots, not really at sunset, but somewhere around that golden hour time. It's softer light, the color is way better, nothing's really blown out. And in this particular shot, the house itself, the house right there where the whole party's kind of taking place at, that's lit up perfect. I mean, you can't really plan that, but when you see it, you can kind of tell from the ground, like, hey, if the roof is lit up, then that's probably a good idea to go ahead and shoot that shot. So that was the drone shot. Now, when I do these aerial shots, I really like to, instead of just doing just your standard fly in, fly out type of deal, I like to actually kind of fly in, turn a little bit, and tilt down while I'm doing it. It just makes the shot more dynamic, and it makes it kind of that more cinematic feel. I know it's really cliche to use the word cinematic or movie-like, but that's what I strive to do with every single video that I do. I always try to make it look as movie-like as possible. So that's just kind of my preference. If it's cliche, it's cliche, whatever. That's kind of just the way I like to do it though. So that right there was the aerial shot. Then we go into the dress shot. So this is kind of one of those detail shots. The way I approach a wedding day is I show up, and I show up probably about an hour before the bride sits down for hair and makeup. During that hour, what I'm doing is I'm capturing all these details like dress, rings, invitations, all that good stuff. This particular shot was a dress right here. Really good natural light. I don't like to put light into a shot unless I have to. This whole thing was nice and lit up really well. I actually did put in a shot from a ProMaster LED 500, and what that was doing was really just illuminating the front of the dress and this handrail. So while we're looking at this particular shot, let's go ahead and look at the whole shot. So if you look at that whole shot right there, everything is just nice, evenly lit. I like to overexpose a tad bit. It's just the style that I prefer, especially for weddings, that nice, I guess, light and airy type of feel. That's just kind of my preference. But what I'm doing is I'm taking my gimbal. If you don't know what a gimbal is, it's a camera stabilizer. You see a lot of people walking around with them now, whether they're one-handed or two-handed. I prefer the two-hand method. The reason why is because I feel like I have more control. I'm able to move left, right. I'm able to tilt with my wrists back and forth. And I'm able just to keep the camera way more steady rather than just kind of holding it with one hand. So what I did with this particular shot is I'm actually holding it kind of like briefcase style. So I'm holding it from the top handle, and I have the camera, or I have the gimbal as low to the ground as I possibly can without scrubbing the ground. And all I'm doing, if you look, I'm just very slowly moving in, okay? So when I'm slowly moving in, it's just kind of creating that reveal. And anytime I can reveal something into the frame, I'm gonna do it. It's one of my favorite things to do, is just kind of to reveal a subject. In this case, the subject's gonna be the dress. So we actually see right down here, you're gonna see that reveal. It reveals the shoes, the base of the dress, and it really just makes the shot interesting. Then we move on to the next detail shot right here. This is gonna be the ring. Typically what I'll do is I will stage this shot myself. I'll go ahead and, I don't go to the extent that a photographer does and make sure everything is like perfectly straight, all the angles are right. What I like to do is kind of just make the ring the focal point and throw stuff around it to where I can shoot multiple angles and get different material for, I guess, what I'm gonna be using that shot for. In this particular shot, I'm using a gimbal again. I really love the use of a gimbal. And what I'm doing is I'm doing another reveal. Like I said, I love reveals. What I'm doing is I'm revealing from behind the bride's veil. So what the photographer did in this instance, which what I would have done too, is you're kind of using that veil to kind of just blanket the subject itself, which is the ring, and it just creates a nice like just cloud effect. And as far as like bouncing the light, that white veil is really going to catch all that light coming in. So sometimes I like to blow that out and let the subject itself kind of be like properly exposed and stuff like that. So let's take a look at this shot. And I mean, and what I'm doing for this is I'm really just taking my gimbal and just really just slowly moving it like this. Let's say you're shooting handheld. You can do this same method. It may not be as smooth. But what you would do is just take your camera and you would just very, very slowly move. What I like to do is I like to move my body instead of my hands. My hands are really just anchoring that camera and making sure the camera doesn't jitter or move. But what's really creating that movement is me taking my body and just kind of swinging my hips like this and really just making sure that I keep that nice steady movement. Now, whenever I'm doing these movements, I always have to keep in mind the rule of thirds. So the rule of thirds, I'll go ahead and I'll put a little screen up right here. If we're looking at the camera, you got the frame, obviously, and then you have these grid lines, okay? There's a lot of people that say, you know, like, oh, if you still have to shoot with the grids on, then you're not a professional. That's all bullshit. Don't pay attention to any of that. What you want to do with those grid lines is use those as a guide. So what I like to do is I always like to imagine someone's face. For example, the ring in this shot would be someone's face. I want to go ahead and position that person's face within those grid lines to where the crosshairs are kind of dead in the center. And if you kind of Google rule of thirds, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. But you always want to kind of give the subject a leading look, make sure they're framed up properly, and that's what we were doing here to kind of make it just flow from shot to shot. So That's how we did that. And what I'm shooting on, guys, is a Panasonic GH5. I use the gimbal for the most part the entire day. It's just my particular preference. I like movement within the shot, but really nice, subtle, soft, slow movements. That's what I like. And then this shot right here. This was actually towards the end of the day. And the thought process behind the video itself, if you listen to the music, so I really try to make the music match the mood of the shoot. So with what we're doing, we're showing all these nice soft details before the tempo picks up. And then this is kind of just a glimpse into the end of the day. So right now, Madelyn and Justin are standing where they got married, you know, probably a couple hours before we took this shot. It was actually about an hour before we took this shot. They're standing there. I put them right back in the same spot. And what I really wanted to get with this shot was we had this just vast lake. I wanted some symmetry, so I went ahead and I framed them up right in the center. And instead of just, you know, instead of just telling them to stand there and look at each other, for video, you want to add movement, okay? So my direction to them on this was to go ahead and, when I say action, go ahead and just take each other's hands and look at each other, okay? So you kind of see that movement right there. They take each other's hands and look at each other. And the whole idea behind them taking each other's hands, I'm thinking for the edit. So I really wanted to kind of create that suspense of like, oh, they're getting married. Like, we want to go ahead and really show that emotion. And that's where the fade to black comes in too. It's kind of like a teaser within a teaser. So that's where that whole thought process came in. But all I'm doing, same thing with the dress. I take the gimbal as low as I can to the ground and just very slowly move the camera in. And that just creates that, just that kind of, that really nice just zoom effect without zooming. So that's how we got that one. A lot of people ask also, how am I keeping them in focus when I'm moving the camera in and out? It's all about knowing your camera and knowing your aperture. If you want to know more about aperture, you can go ahead and Google it. I can maybe do a video on that later explaining what it does, but it's basically like the iris in your eye. You want to shoot at a high enough aperture to where things are going to stay in focus if you move the camera. But sometimes, for example, this ring shot, you want to shoot at a low enough aperture to where this veil is all nice and soft and blurry, the background's nice and blurry, and the only thing in focus is the ring. I am shooting all manual focus, okay? So when I shoot manual focus, the whole point in shooting manual is that I have 100% complete control of the image. Let's say I was shooting in auto. In this particular instance, I feel like auto would be fine. But let's say that we had trees behind them. Trees will get really muddy, and trees will actually kind of blend in with the bride and groom. So if we were to shoot this in auto with trees behind them, no doubt about it, they would be out of focus and the trees would be in focus because the camera is searching for what to focus on. So learn manual focus, learn manual settings. It's going to make you a better shooter. It's going to be harder, yes, but in time, you're going to have way more control of the camera and the overall image that comes out of it. We kind of had like that suspenseful just, you know, tempo going down and then fade out and then boom, the tempo picks up with the violins in the back. So we want to go ahead and really start showing the preparation of the day. I always like to shoot hair and makeup. Not too much hair because there's not too much that goes into it. I'll shoot hair if we have, let's say the hairstylist is going to be actually like put a hair piece like the veil in her hair, or they're going to put maybe some flowers or something like that in. Then I'll shoot some detail shots of that. But if we're doing the makeup, there's so much that you can do with the makeup shots. The things I like to focus on the most are eyes, lips, any brushing type of shots, and then of course the setting spray shot at the very end. If you do this long enough, I've been doing this for 8 years now with weddings, you learn a lot about makeup even though you don't wear it. And the setting spray shot is a really, really cool shot. So I always ask the makeup artist, hey, you know, do you do setting spray at the end? Do you start with eyes or do you end with eyes? And all of these questions that I'm asking them is to help me out. So for example, this particular makeup artist, but I asked her, you know, do you go ahead and start with eyes or end with eyes? Reason why I asked that is because let's say they start with eyes, that means there's no foundation on the bride's face. So you don't want to shoot her like that. It doesn't matter if, you know, if she doesn't care about that, like if she's not self-conscious about the way she looks. It's more about the overall shot itself. So she's going to look better with all her makeup done rather than just her eyes done and nothing else, because her skin's going to probably be blotchy. She's probably nervous that day. She's probably drinking because it's her wedding day. So we don't want blotchy skin. We want everything nice and smooth. That's why I asked those questions. Since she started with eyes, what I did was I waited until kind of the end, and I shot everything kind of from the back of the bride's head that I wanted of the makeup artist until we got to the point where I felt like, let's go ahead and shoot the bride. So at this point, setting spray is the very last thing that a makeup artist is going to do. Madelyn is all done up with her makeup. Her eyes are done. Obviously, you can see her eyelashes, lips are done. And the whole idea behind the setting spray shot is it's a really beautiful shot. You want a darker background, so that nice wall back there is really going to show every single little particle that we got going on. So that's kind of how we do that. And that was filmed at 60 frames per second. I slow it down to a 24 frames per second timeline. So, I mean, you just see all those little particles kind of come out, and it looks really good. This right here is a really fun shot of Madelyn, all her girls. They wanted to go ahead and pop the champagne. So a lot of this stuff is not directed. Most of it is, but some of it's not. So in a sense like this, you know, like, look, me and the photographer, we went ahead, we set up the bridal party, and we set up Madelyn in the center. I'm just like, look, go ahead and pop that bottle of champagne. Some of the things we told them beforehand was, one, how to do it. Not a lot of people just go ahead and pop a bottle of champagne, but when you shoot weddings, you see it so often, you know exactly how to do it. So you give them direction on how to do that. And then the thing I always like to tell everyone that's there is, look, right before that champagne bottle pops, you're going to have this scared look on your face. I don't want you to look scared. I want you to look happy. So just kind of think in the back of your head, don't freak out when this thing pops off. So that's how we did that. The actual pop-off shot, everyone disregarded what I said about, you know, looking happy, looking this and that. So they all kind of had that freaked out look on her face, especially Madelyn. Madelyn's face was priceless when the actual champagne popped. So what I did was I used this shot instead, which was after the pop, and she just shook the thing up. Everyone's happy, everyone's excited. And this was a lot of fun to do. This was another gimbal shot. And I want to say every single shot is a gimbal shot. I will let you know if it's not, but even the makeup artist shot, this one right here, that was a gimbal shot, and then this one too. So this particular shot right here, this is also another gimbal shot, except now it's a close-up. That's why it looks different. You always want to vary your shots, whether it's going to be a close-up, a medium, or a wide shot. You want to get multiple angles and multiple focal lengths, so that way when you actually do go to edit or you send your stuff off to an editor, they have enough resources to make sure that the shots don't look like all GoPro wide shots, like wide, wide, wide. You want to make sure that you have enough variety in there. This is Justin just kind of putting his watch on. Whenever I show shots of the groom, more than likely they're already dressed. What I like to do is once I find the groom, once I meet him, I go ahead and say, look, man, go ahead and take your jacket off, take your vest off if you're wearing one. If you have a watch, take that off. And really just go ahead and get these nice detail shots. So just asked him to take his watch off, put it back on. We did it twice. This is just a really just cool shot. I asked him to take his time putting on his watch. A lot of grooms, like anyone that wears a watch, you know, this little smartwatch right here, I know exactly how to just boom, boom, flip it on real quick, and then we're done. What you want to do in a case like this, you're shooting at such a close-up shot that your focal length is not going to be a lot, or your depth of field is going to be very shallow. So what that means is if I move the camera back a little bit, more than likely that watch is going to be blurry. If I move it in a little bit, it's going to be blurry. So you want to keep that distance between them. So this is what I asked them to do. Say, look, take your time. When you're putting this watch on, take your time like that. Always kind of poke your wrist out and just make sure you're taking your time, okay? So that's how we did that. All right, so this right here is Justin and his dad. I always like the dad or the best man. I always prefer the dad. It always depends on the relationship that the groom has to the dad. In this case, they have a good relationship, so I said, look, man, let's go ahead and let's have your dad kind of throw on your jacket, straighten up your tie, stuff like that. It'll look really good, and it'll be a nice memory for the video. This is also staged. It's staged, but it's not. The emotion they have behind the actual shoot itself is not staged, but the moment itself is. So what I asked his dad to do was, look, go ahead and throw his jacket on him. Justin, when your jacket's on, I want you to turn around to your dad. Dad, when he turns around, I want you to go ahead and fix his tie up, make sure his jacket's all straight, and this and that. Little detail shot of the cake. So this cake was actually in the freezer before we shot this, thing right here. What I did was there was nothing but food and drinks and everything all over this table. I went ahead and I wiped the table off nice and good. I threw everything out of the frame, and I went ahead and just set the cake where I needed it to. So feel free to move stuff. Don't be afraid to, move props, move the dress, move the rings. Ask the bride, hey, do you have any details that you really want shot that are important to you? It's your job as the videographer or the photographer that day to capture these moments, and you can't just wait for them. If you wait for them, then more than likely you might get it, but you might not. So your work is not going to be consistent. So I always like to take matters into my own hands, and I took this cake out of the freezer. They asked me where, or I asked them where it was at. I even put the little cake topper in there because it wouldn't fit in the freezer with the cake topper. So we just stabbed that thing right on into the top of the cake and positioned it the way we wanted and rock and rolled from there. So what I did, you'll see that everything in this shot is the same color tone. What I did was you had these ugly yellow lights above the dining table, or the little breakfast nook, whatever you want to call it. Just like every other house. Every house has yellow lights. So what you want to do is you want to turn all those lights off if you have enough light to shoot. If you don't have enough light to shoot, then what I would recommend is leave those yellow lights on and bring in a external light that matches the same color, okay? So you have a whole bunch of options with light, but that's what I like to do. This is also another gimbal shot, GH5. The lens I've been using for every single one of these shots is a Sigma Art 18 to 35 1.8. It's a really sharp lens, and it's really good. Again, this is all manual focus, all manual settings. So what I'm doing is on my gimbal, I have a little mount for my phone, and I use my phone to actually see what I'm shooting through the Panasonic Image app. It's a free app. You should definitely download it if you shoot Panasonic. It makes life a whole lot easier, and there's not a lot of lag. Actually, there's really no lag. I'm actually using it right now, and I can see myself talk, wave my hands. It's a really good tool to use, and it's free. So what I'm doing right now is I'm actually touching the screen to focus on what I want to shoot. So technically, it's kind of autofocus, but it's not. So what I'm doing is it's manual focus up until I touch that screen. I tell it where I want the focus to be, and after I click on that, it's manual focus again. So once I have that manual focus set, or once I have that focal point set, then it's manual. So I have to keep in mind that I can't move too far out, too far in, or I'm going to lose that focus. So kind of keep that in mind. Nice little detail of the top of the cake. So whenever you have details, get multiple shots, multiple angles, because you don't know how many times you can use this as filler footage. Filler footage is stuff that it helps tell the story, but it's not necessary, if that makes sense. This is just a pretty shot of something that's important. It's their wedding cake. And you'll see in every single shot I do, I'm moving left, right, in, or out. That's just my particular style. There's a lot of people that shoot with tripod and monopod only, and they lock everything off, and it still looks just as beautiful. But it really just comes down to a preference, and I've always had that preference of creating some movement. If you watch a lot of Hollywood movies or even Netflix produced TV shows, anything now that's like really cinematic, they incorporate those nice slow movements. So that's what I like. This is just a nice little filler shot of a detail of where we're at. We're not on the coast, but we're on this massive lake that has lily pads. It has grass coming up. You can actually see the fish playing under the water, not playing, doing whatever they're doing under the water. Really just creating that sense of where we're at. This welcome sign, I shot this pretty much in the beginning of the day. I saw the welcome sign. It was actually under a little overhang canopy type of thing. And I was like, look, let's go ahead and let's just move this out to the dock at the house. That dock is not where they got married. I just wanted to create that sense of, one, where we're at, and then two, why we're here. So we have this shot of, the sign itself that explains why we're here. Welcome to Madelyn and Justin's wedding. And then, of course, this dock with all this water behind it. That is, that explains the scene of where we're at. Nice little detail shot of the dress. This is always one of my favorite go-to shots to get, is a nice detail of either the zip up, the lacing of the dress, or in this case, the bride had those little buttons with the strings that kind of hold them on. One of the bridesmaids actually came in with a little comb and pick and was putting these on, and she was just like, oh no, don't shoot this, it's ugly. I didn't have the actual thing, the tool to use to do it. It doesn't matter if it's ugly. It's a wedding dress. That's what's happening on the wedding day. And if you compose it properly, once again, rule of thirds, we're on the left side of the screen and we're a little bit higher than center. If it's composed nicely like this, then you're not even going to notice that she's not using the right tool. Her nails are done. The color all looks really good. The lighting looks good. That's what matters. This was a really nice shot. I had to get all the way in the back corner of the room. I always like to do this shot, and what I do is I'm using the gimbal again with the 18 to 35, and I'm zoomed all the way out to 18. I overexpose the dress just based on the light, and I want to go ahead and expose for the skin tones. I'm not too concerned about overexposing for the dress because once again, I want that light and airy feel. If we went full on like cinematic mode and I exposed for the brightest thing in the room, which would be anything white, these columns, this staircase back here with that massive window, she would just be a shadow. And, we don't want that. We want to show, when you see someone smiling and as happy as she is right now, we want the image to reflect that because it's all psychological. So that's why I go for kind of like that light and airy feel. Now, what I'm doing in this shot is she's already in her dress. She's already been buttoned up, zipped up, and this and that. Mom just put her veil in her hair. What we wanted to do was just capture this interaction right here. And the action that I'm telling Madelyn to do, let's see. So if you actually look right at her head, it's going to be up here. What I'm asking her to do is, Madelyn, go ahead and look forward at the wall for me. Look directly straight. When I say action, I want you to kind of look down at your shoulder like this and smile, okay? So watch her. So that creates just a really nice look for her. So what it's doing, it's helping her make her back up straight like this, and she gets to kind of go ahead and kind of look at her mom, but she's not really looking at her. And when she looks that way, it's kind of driving all the attention down to down her arm, through this dress, and it's creating this nice triangle effect right here. So that's just, it's a nice focal point type of thing that we're looking at. Pay attention again to framing. Okay, we have her framed over here. Both of their heads are facing this way. Sorry about these birds that are chirping like crazy. They're framed this way because their noses are pointing in that direction. So we want to go ahead and kind of frame that way. It's called a leading look or nose room and stuff like that. And what I'm telling her mom to do is I'm just like, look, Mom, what I want you to do is just go ahead and play with the veil. When I say action, I just want you to kind of play with the veil. I saw her fluff it out one time, and you know, you see things and you want to recreate these things. So I asked her, I was like, hey, go ahead. When I say action, Madelyn, go ahead and look straight, look down at your shoulder. Mom, when I yell action, I want you to go ahead and kind of floof out that veil and really just kind of look down at her dress and kind of admire the way your daughter looks on her wedding day. This is my favorite shot. That is my favorite shot to do on a wedding day. I am notorious for making the bride and her mom and the bridesmaids cry whenever we do this shot. And I've gotten to the point now where I make sure I let the photographer know, like, hey, I'm going to do this particular shot. I have not let any of them know. Just be prepared. Here's the way I set it up. And here's the way I set it up. So what I do is I go ahead and I get the bride and her mom. I get the bride and her mom just standing right in front of each other. And the direction that I give, and I always frame it to where all the bridesmaids are in the background, the groom's mom's in the background, because we want to see their reaction, even though they're blurred out due to the focal length or the depth of field. Even though they're blurred out, we can still see the expression on their face. So what I do is I said, Madelyn, I want you to go ahead and stand in front of your mom. I want you guys to go ahead and stand looking at each other. Mom, what I want you to do is I want you to go ahead and make sure her hair's in the right spot, make sure her earrings are looking good, make sure her dress is looking good. While she's doing that, I interrupt them. I say, Mom, do me a favor. Go ahead and look at your daughter. Give her a big old mom hug. Whenever I say that, this little moment right here happens. And even though it's staged, it's such a genuine moment because they did not expect me to go ahead and tell them that. So you're creating this moment that, one, it's going to live on forever because they have photos of it, they have video of it, but two, it's just a sweet moment on their wedding day. The bridesmaids back here also were not expecting. You'll see this next shot. So you see that next shot right there. They weren't expecting it. They all have tears in their eyes. She's crying right here. Sorry, I had to pause it right there, but you know, it is what it is. And it just makes the moment look good. This is the first shot in this whole video where I'm using a different setup. So I have two cameras on the wedding day. Well, two A cameras. I have my my gimbal with my GH5 with my 18 to 35 1.8. And then I also have the same camera, the GH5, with a 70 to 200 on a monopod. What I like to do with the 7200 is capture reaction shots and extreme close-ups. So this is where experience and amount of weddings comes in handy, because at this point I already know I got the shot that I need. Now I need to move on to reactions because I also need those. Sometimes I don't get them, and it's not really a fault of my own or a fault of anyone else. It's really just kind of like a time scenario type of deal, and that's what makes every single wedding different. So that's kind of how we do that. And when I say we, I'm always kind of referring to me and everyone there. The photographers, the bridesmaids, the subjects, the bride and groom, the mom. So all of these little things, we are one big team that day. So I primarily shoot solo. And you know, being able to shoot solo but act as everyone is on the same team, that is really important to me because it just helps everyone involved. So let's move on to the next shot. So I do the same thing with mom, or mom of the groom. So what I'm asking the groom's mom to do is same thing. Mom, go ahead and fix up his boutonniere, make sure his suit's straight, this and that. I catch him off guard. Hey guys, do me a favor. Mom, look at your son. Give him a big old mom hug. They do that. Really genuine hug right there. There's nothing fake at all about that reaction, that smile. And she's really bringing him in close, okay? So even though it's a staged moment, you know, don't make it feel staged, okay? You are there on the wedding day not only to capture these genuine moments, but you're also there to create moments. And these are things that the couple is going to remember. And it's super important. You have a really important job that day. And a lot of people don't think of it that way, but when your job is to create moments that are only going to happen once, it's a pretty big weight on your shoulders, and you have to kind of be prepared to know a lot of these things. And something before we move on to this next shot, I shot this after the wedding. So wedding has already happened. The photographers are actually over to the right shooting Madelyn and her family, little family photos. So I just stole Mom and Justin really quick just for this quick shot. And in the edit, I'm able to put it wherever I want and help tell that story. One of my favorite moments of any wedding day is doing a first look with the bride's dad. I have a little like system that I use to kind of hype the dad up and amp him up without him knowing. So, you know, right before I shoot this particular moment, I go ahead and I actually mic him up just in case they say anything sweet. In this case, you can see on his lips he's saying, wow. You'll see right here. Oh, he said, oh my God, that's what he did. But, you know, in this particular case, that's why I mic them up. And when I'm miking him up, this is what I'm telling him. I'm telling him, look, man, I tell this to every single dad on the wedding day. This is going to be one of the only times during the day that no one's going to be wanting to take selfies with your daughter. No one's going to be pulling you guys away from each other and this and that. This is a moment that is genuinely for you too. This is your first time to see her all done up in her dress, her hair, her makeup, and everything right before you walk her down the aisle. When I tell them these words, you know, 9 times out of 10, they start getting some emotions going. They're thanking you, they're shaking your hand, this and that. At that point, you got to go ahead and get them set up and ready, because at this point they are anxious to see their daughter or their stepdaughter or whoever it may be. So you really want to go ahead and make sure that you get that moment done quickly after you kind of amp them up a little bit. That moment right there, so that was actually a genuine moment. That was the first hug between bride and dad on the wedding day. So, you know, some stuff you don't stage. Some stuff you literally just let the camera roll and hope something good happens. When you get enough experience in this and shoot long enough, you come to understand when genuine moments are going to happen. This is one of those moments where you know it's going to be a genuine moment, so just shut up, don't say anything, wait for that moment to end, and then once it ends, then you can go ahead and do some stuff like, hey, Madelyn, go ahead and kind of fix up your dad's boutonniere, stuff like that. We didn't do that in this case because I had to go immediately to the groom because I think we were running about 30 minutes before the actual wedding. I got to set up equipment, I got to set up audio gear, I got to talk to the DJ about what's going on. So this is one of those things where let's capture as much as we can genuinely and then pack up and roll out. So, bride walking down the aisle with dad. You'll notice throughout the entire time, throughout this entire video, I've used nothing but gimbal for the most part, except for that one reaction of the bridesmaid shot. I like using the gimbal because it gives me a way to be creative, get a lot of creative movement type of shots that I like. But when it comes to very important moments like the ceremony, you can't direct it and there are no redos. So I like to shoot as safe as I possibly can to where I know I'm going to get the shot and it's going to be an easy shot to get. This particular shot was with a 70-200 with my monopod, and all I'm doing is I'm locked off. I'm locked off and I'm racking focus. So they're not in autofocus. If this was autofocus, more than likely it would have been jumping focus from them to here to this tree. If facial recognition would have picked up on her face or her face, it might have picked up on them. So manual focus again, really important. So groom's reaction shot. I have a camera set up. I have a camera set up to capture his reaction shot because one of the things that my couples get when they book me is their full ceremony video. So I have 2 separate GH4s running to capture the full ceremony in its entirety. But they had such a long aisle that I was able to swing around and get Justin's reaction shot. And I always like to frame it to where Justin's head is going to be in between bride and dad to really just get that, you know, once again, that reveal shot that we're looking for. So, going to be revealed right from behind her head. They're locking eyes, looking at each other. It's just a beautiful moment. So, you want to capture that. Again, that was a 7200 with a monopod. This was during the wedding. So this was Plan B. This was a Plan B wedding. I'll explain really quickly some things that led up to this. Aside from the coronavirus completely ruining this couple's plans and everything, there was 100% thunderstorms that day. We actually had a tropical storm. This is North Carolina, so we had a tropical storm coming through. So you'll see all these clouds in the background. You'll see it's really dark back there too. And on top of that, this dock was underwater the night before. So everything was against this couple, and it was pretty tense leading up to the actual wedding day. But other than that first look with Dad, it did not rain at all the entire day except at that moment. So they lucked out a lot. You see the dock is dry, so and the water is just below the pier. So it worked out really well. It wasn't traditional, but you know, that's what makes this particular wedding awesome. Now, restrictions. On a normal wedding, I would be able to walk over here and pretty much stand where this water's at and get a really nice reaction shot of Justin looking at Madelyn. Same thing on this side, I would walk over here. And obviously we're being discreet. You don't want to, you know, ruin anyone's experience at the wedding. I would stand over here, get the same thing in Madelyn. With this right here, we couldn't do that. So you had to be really creative. And when I say really creative, it's kind of like a lack of creativity because you can only shoot from one angle. So you kind of had to vary whether or not you did wide shots, close-ups, whether you switched your angle up from a low angle to a high angle to dead on. This is a lower angle shot to really show the sky, the vastness of the lake, and really just this moment. And this looks really familiar compared to that first shot that was in the beginning of their film, kind of leading up to this moment. So, the kiss, of course, what I was just talking about earlier with varying up your focal length and your shot selection and stuff like that. I zoomed all the way in at 200, and I framed them up differently from the previous shot, which was dead center, to make it to where when I cut from one angle to the next, even though it's shot from the same place, it looks different. And you'll notice that the music also has changed. So the music has now kind of gone down. So let's listen to it. We're leading up to that moment. Right there, the tempo of the music changed. We're coming back down now. So we want to go ahead and just kind of slow the roll down and show a really nice ending shot. The last shot was a drone shot that I did after the wedding was all over, after the photographer got all their family portraits done. We took them back out to the end of the pier and just wanted to get a really nice shot of just them as a couple, the vastness of the lake with the sky. And my direction for this was go ahead, stand chest to chest, hold hands, and when I say action, I want you guys to touch forehead to forehead. When you do that nice slow forehead to forehead, it looks really, really good. I shot this particular shot 24 frames per second at 4K, but you'll notice that it is in slow motion. So with some footage that is in 24 frames per second, you can do kind of like an optical flow or a warp stabilizer, depending on what you edit with, and slow it down to 40%. Which would be equivalent to slowing down a 60 frames per second to a 24 frame per second timeline. That's what creates that nice slow movement. It looks like we shot it in 60, but it was really in 24. And that's pretty much it, guys. That was Madelyn and Justin's wedding trailer. If you want to, go ahead and subscribe. This is going to be on YouTube. I'm going to do all these videos on YouTube. So go ahead and subscribe, reach out, ask questions. I'm an open book. I don't keep secrets. Go ahead and ask me anything you need to, and I'll be happy to answer it for you. So until next time, guys, it was fun. Later.